My idiotic corporate managers make the dumbest policy change on planet Earth by allowing children to eat for free at our restaurant every single Sunday, resulting in some of the most chaotic nights of service I've ever experienced in my life, with this restaurant eventually having to shut down. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I'm pretty happy overall with where I work now, but this is a tale from years ago at my first serving job. Two things stand out about the following issue. One, I am surprised how normal we can find stuff at our first jobs. Then later when we get experienced, we can see how actually insane they were. And two, we can see how utterly clueless corporate can be. I will add this place I'm talking about did eventually go out of business, so I'm honestly not really surprised. So during college, I worked at a family-oriented Italian place. They tried to appeal to the higher end of casual dining. Pretty decent food, but nothing super special. But we were oh so family friendly. So corporate decided they wanted us to be the place everyone in the area thought of when taking their family out to eat. So they implemented the dreaded 3-word policy. They said that kids eat free. Now this is not an unheard of policy, but most places I've heard of that do this do it on a slower day like Tuesday just to get a little extra pop. But no, our higher-ups decided to make this all day Sunday. But wait, you might be saying, don't most places that do that have it with minimum purchase? Places I've been to have a policy like, oh, 1 kid's meal per adult meal. And true, we did have a minimum, but for every adult entree purchased, you would then get 4 free kids meals. So guess what ended up happening? And you probably know, but I'm just gonna spell it out. Our kids meals came with bread, super salad, an entree, and dessert. And our cheapest adult entrees were $7. So we did become the place that people took their families out to eat. And this was their whole families. And this was every single Sunday. It was completely common, if not normal, for nearly 20 people to come in that were essentially what you would expect to see on a weekday field trip to a Chuck E. Cheese. I mean, we were by far the cheapest place in town. You would have a 10-top where 2 parents had 8 kids. Parents order the cheapest entrees and waters, and the whole bill for a 10-top would come out to be like $16. Now, we had auto gratuity on parties of 8 or more, but seriously, so what? That was still less than $3 for a 10-top. We would easily work a double on Sunday, have no tables smaller than the occasional 4-top, get 20% tips on every table, and still be clearing like $6 to $9 an hour. Oh, and by the way, Sundays were mandatory. And as a fun bonus, we had a carpet. So you can imagine the absolute disaster that was the restaurant by Sunday night. No restaurant in the city was as cheap as we were on Sunday. You can't take 10 people out to McDonald's and eat for less than $20, let alone get a full course meal for everybody. It took corporate a year to finally realize how bad our Sunday numbers actually were, because we were essentially operating at a loss. And sure, specials are there to get people in the door, but when they know Sunday's the only day they get that deal, then that's the day they're only gonna show up. Corporate also finally noticed how low our numbers were on adult entrees. Just imagine you want to go to a nice restaurant, but when you and your day walk in, you see 75 plus kids, sometimes literally running around the dining room. I can't tell you the number of times I saw a group of adults walk in, look around, and walk right back out on a Sunday. Plus, those that stayed usually had to contend with a wait, and even more would be standing around the lobby, listening to the horrendous noise, and then just change their minds. Finally, and I mean finally, corporate realized their mistake and changed the policy, and eventually they made it into 1 kid's meal per entree. I worked the Sunday after it happened, and my god, it was a nightmare. Now, my general manager at this time was a pretty smart cookie. She made signs saying this for the front door. She told the hostess to make sure to tell every guest with kids, even if it was more adults than kids, about the policy change. And yes, she was going to be enforcing it. There would be no comps because nobody told us, or if they complained that it was cheaper last week. Well, customers were having a full-on meltdown in the lobby. It was funny, and I'm gonna be honest, also kind of sad. But look, I'm not a complete jerk. I'm sure for some of these families, this was the only way they could actually get to go out and have a restaurant experience. And I'm not gonna lie, I thought I was gonna have a blast that day seeing entitled Karen screaming to talk to a manager, and trust me, there were some, but I also saw little kids being led out of the lobby crying, saying, "But mom, you said we would have pizza tonight." One grown woman literally fell to her knees crying in the lobby. So after that, I wasn't at the company for much longer, maybe 2 or 3 months, but Sundays quickly became the opposite. They were ghost towns for a while. A few of the more reasonable sized families came in, maybe only having to pay for 1 or 2 extra kids meals, or splitting them for the younger kids. But we had already gotten the reputation of being a kids place, and even though I quit, I still had friends that worked there long afterwards. They said that Sundays stayed dead, but at least they didn't have the sheer amount of cleaning or screaming that had become the normal after this stupid policy. Wow, that literally sounds like my worst nightmare. Like, what was corporate thinking? Did they really think that people would be reasonable and not try to take advantage of this and be like, oh my god, free food for our kids, and we get to eat at a restaurant, like I'm in. That really sucks, and I'm sure that completely ruined the job for literally everybody there. And then for them to change the policy and be like, okay, we gotta enforce this. It's like at that point, you're being punished for corporate stupid decision. Like how disconnected from your restaurant chain can you possibly be? So truly, I can only imagine trying to live through that, because that situation sounds absolutely miserable. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My fiance leaves dishes to rot in the kitchen, but also gets mad at me when I try to clean them up. So now I'm incredibly confused, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my fiance and I have been together for over a year, and we moved in together a few months ago. I love her very much, and I want to work through things together, but when it comes to cleaning, there's been a lot of issues recently, and we really only fight over the dishes, and it's been a reoccurring thing that's making me question my sanity. I don't know if I should just let it go, or if she's being completely stubborn. Basically, she leaves huge piles of rotting pots and dishes of food on the counters and stoves for several days, even up to weeks if I don't clean them. And then she gets mad that I didn't clean them how she liked it. She thinks that sponges are dirty, as she works in a microbiology lab, and I should be wiping things down with my bare hands and water, while also saying that I don't clean things well enough. I called her crazy once for thinking like that, and then I apologized. But if I'm being honest, I still think she's a bit neurotic. I can't cook or wash my hands properly with all the dishes in the sink, and I have to do them and put them away before she comes home just to avoid any kind of argument. I've told her that I found leaving food out to rot and mold is absolutely disgusting, and it makes it harder for me to live this way, but she has not taken any of this seriously. She got a mini dishwasher to fix the issue, but it still has not helped. I'm pretty sure that she thinks that it helps, but I resent that it takes from what limited counter space we have and doesn't do much in the way of rotting food literally everywhere. The core of my frustration is that I go to work and go to classes a lot more than she does, and when I come home at night to an apartment that looks worse than I left it, it really sucks. I'm currently recovering from a major surgery, and I have pushed myself a bit too much while cleaning up after myself and after her. I mean, her apartment was absolutely filthy when I met her, and I assumed that I would do the dishes, which is fine, but being met with yelling and hovering when I do them is honestly stressing me out, and at this point, I don't really know what to do. She has diagnosed and treated ADHD and depression, and was raised by people who kind of suck, so I've been giving her some kind of grace, but at this point, I really don't know what to do. Okay, seriously, this is insane. I'm sorry, but there's just no good reason for her to not only leave food out, but then complain when you start to clean it up. Like, I don't know about you, but I would prefer having it cleaned up and taken care of, instead of micromanaging how it's cleaned up when she's not even doing it herself. And sure, she might think that sponges are dirty, but has she looked at her countertop and stove? It's literally covered in weeks worth of rotting food. How can that be any cleaner? So for her to hover over you about the dishes that she literally left out for weeks, while also doing nothing about these dishes, in my opinion, is so hypocritical it's not even funny. And it's especially bad that she just doesn't seem to care. So no, I don't think you've done anything wrong, because the alternative to not cleaning up this mess is literally a rotting infestation of God knows what kind of bacteria. And that is something you definitely do not want to live with. My boyfriend is demanding that I don't see my family after he got rejected from attending a family get-together. And despite the fact that I tried to explain that it's really not that deep, my boyfriend is refusing to see my point of view. Here's what happened. I'm a 19-year-old female, and my boyfriend of 2 years and I recently got into a heated argument. It started when I asked him if he could drive me to my brother's house so I could build a PC with him. I was originally going to be driven by my other brother, but he had plans so he couldn't do it. After I got the yes from my boyfriend, I texted my brother to make sure that it was okay, and to my surprise, he said no. He followed up that text message later saying that he wanted it to be me and my other brother so he could finally show us his fully furnished apartment. So I told my boyfriend there was a change of plans, but when I said this, he was very offended by the rejection, saying that this was an awful thing to do. I called him up and he was really upset, but in the middle of the call, I got another call from my brother, so I excused myself to answer my brother's call. It actually turned out to be a group call with me and all three of my brothers. We worked out the plans for me to come over, but in the middle of the conversation, I asked why my boyfriend couldn't just drive me because it would be more convenient for everybody. My brother said something along the lines of only wanting family over there, and that he thought my boyfriend would be too busy anyways because he works over the weekend. That's when I found out that building the PC takes way longer than I thought, and I would be spending the night from Saturday to Sunday. Now this is important because my boyfriend had the day off on Saturday but not for Sunday. After we finally worked everything out, I called my boyfriend again to try and console console him and explain the situation more to him. He was still really upset, but I explained that my brother only wanted family over and also assumed that he'd be working. But when I said that, he actually got more upset, which is unusual, especially because my boyfriend is typically a really cool-headed person and never yells. After a bit of arguing, he said he wouldn't go if he were in my position. I asked him to elaborate, and he said that if it were his brother excluding me, then he wouldn't go to his place. I told him I don't think that's true. My boyfriend's brother lives at home right now, but when he had an apartment, I was almost never invited over. And the one time that I was, I got ignored the entire time. His brother clearly doesn't like me and usually just ignores me, but has also actively talked crap about me and my boyfriend's relationship behind our backs. He also still went to his brother's place whenever he got invited, unless he just didn't feel like it. He still regularly hangs out with his brother at events where all the kids in the family are invited, even the brother's fiance's little sister and her boyfriend, but not me. And I explained that to him. Well, he then got upset and said he didn't want to talk about this anymore. I asked him if he still thinks I shouldn't see my brother over this, and he responded by saying I can do whatever I want. Later, he called me because we usually call to update each other at night, and he said he felt like my brother doesn't like him. He thought there was progress there, but doesn't think that anymore because of this situation. We almost ended up arguing again, but I said we should just talk later when we're not as upset. I'm just honestly not sure what to do. I agree with him that it really hurts being rejected like that and feeling excluded, but I think it's unreasonable to expect me not to see my brother, especially when I'm not meeting up with him just to hang out, but to build a PC that I bought, and I can't build by myself at home. I also tried to explain that my brother doesn't hate him and doesn't show a lot of displays of affection, even to me. He seems neutral most of the time, but will talk to him and occasionally joke around. It is important to note that when I told my boyfriend that, he responded by saying, no, he doesn't. So what do I say to explain to my boyfriend my perspective? Or is my judgment clouded in some kind of way? Do I need to comfort my boyfriend more about this and ask for more of a reason why? Me and my boyfriend are usually really good about communicating through issues, especially after dating for more than 2 years. But this situation is really messy, and I want to make sure I'm not being unfair to him. I would never want him to feel unsupported, especially because I know what it's like to be rejected by your partner's family. What should I do? Honestly, I don't think you're the jerk here, and I think the fact that your boyfriend's like, oh, I wouldn't go to his house if I were you, with him basically saying like, yeah, don't see your family, like that's really weird and just really immature. Because the truth is, your brother has not rejected your boyfriend. Like literally, this is a very extenuating circumstance, and you spending time with your family doesn't mean that they don't like your boyfriend. So honestly, I kind of think your boyfriend's being super immature because this situation is completely overblown. Am I the jerk for refusing to pay for my friend's dinner after he changed his order last minute, making the price way higher than I was expecting? Here's what happened. Okay, so I invited my friend to dinner at a nicer restaurant last weekend. We were both in the mood for something a little more upscale, but I still wanted to keep it relatively affordable. We talked about it beforehand, and I suggested a couple of places that weren't too pricey, and my friend seemed on board. When we got there, we both ordered dishes that were reasonably priced. I was planning to pay for the meal since I had some extra cash, and I thought it would be a nice thing to do. Nothing crazy, but just a chill dinner. When the waiter came, my friend ordered a mid-range entree, but then when the waiter came back for drinks, he suddenly asked for a really expensive cocktail, which was way more than I was getting. After the waiter left, he also added an appetizer that was even pricier than the drink. I started feeling uncomfortable because the total was quickly adding up to way more than I expected. It was way over what we had talked about. When the bill came, I mentioned to my friend that it was more than I had planned, and he just shrugged and said, "You said you'd pay for it though." Now at that point, I felt kind of stuck, but I didn't think it was fair for me to cover the whole thing when he changed his order so much. So I told him that I wasn't paying for everything and that he should cover his own meal. He then got really upset, saying I was breaking my word and making him look bad in front of the waiter. He ended up paying for his portion, but things were super awkward and now he's been acting incredibly distant. So am I the jerk for refusing to pay for his part of the dinner after he changed his order so many times? I felt like I was being reasonable, but right now I'm wondering if I handled it wrong. What should I do? No, you're not the jerk here. Your friend absolutely tried to play you. He knew you were gonna pay for it, so he said to himself, okay, I'm gonna order all the expensive stuff. Like, that's not fair at all, like seriously. And his reaction of being like, oh, you're just gonna pay for it. Like, that is so telling to me that he just didn't care about the price, and he was clearly taking advantage of your kindness. So no, you're definitely not the jerk, because your friend was clearly trying to take advantage of you. Am I the jerk for missing out on another big moment for my siblings' lives after I told them that no, I didn't want to be involved in the stuff they were doing? Because right now I'm being guilt-tripped by my dad and my stepmom, and at this point I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, my dad is so inconsistent about being in my life. He and my mom divorced when I was 1 year old, but he bailed days after I was born. He came back when I was 8 months old, and my mom let him stay a month before realizing he wasn't serious about being a family with us, and he was just using her for a place to stay. Once he realized that she wasn't going to give in, he bailed again. He was in my life for a year when I was like 3 or 4 years old. The next time was when I was 8 years old. He was in my life for a few months under supervision, but then he left again, and he made 2 more appearances when I was 10. He didn't really pay child support either, which is something that I learned this summer. Some money was given for me, but probably less than $400 in the last 16 years if what he said is right. When I was 13 years old, he moved here for good, or so he says. He was married again, and he had some kids with his wife. He went back to restart visitation with me, got some supervised visits again that eventually became 1 overnight a month. But now I have to spend every other weekend at his house, even though I don't want to. And I did speak to a judge about my wishes, but he told me it was in my best interest to have a relationship with my family. I really don't like being there, and I try to only sleep in the bed I have at his house. I never take anything I care about, and I don't have the room personalized or anything like that. The thing about all of this is that my dad and his wife encourage their kids to spend time with me and engage with me. They like having me there, and they told me before they wish I'd spend more time there and with them. The kids did nothing wrong, but I don't want to focus on a relationship with them. I feel nothing for them, but it's expected that I'd be there for the big moments in their lives, not just by their parents, but my dad's parents, who I don't really know outside of some of the time I spent with him. I also feel like I need to be a good brother, and they expect me to take that role very seriously, which I find crazy, since I don't know any of these people all that much, and honestly, I don't want to. If it's not my dad's weekends, I do miss the big stuff, and I don't try to be there for them. For example, I got invited to go trick-or-treating with them on Halloween, but I said no. I then got a reply back that they really wanted me to come, but I didn't. And then I got sent so many text messages from my dad's phone and phones that I assume are his wife's and his parents, claiming that I'm awful for missing another big moment from my half-siblings. I then blocked all the other numbers, but my dad's number is still doing the same garbage. So truly, am I the jerk in this situation? Because right now I'm incredibly frustrated. No, you're not the jerk. Your dad's a massive hypocrite. This new family is literally his redo at being a father. He failed the first time, so now he's like, oh yeah, let's try again. And suddenly he's Mr. Righteous, and he's like, oh, you don't want to miss the big moments in these kids' lives. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? You were never in the original poster's life at all. This is so hypocritical, it's not even funny. And honestly, going trick-or-treating is not some make or break moment in a kid's life. That is not some big moment. Like, that is such a weird overestimation, it's not even funny. So no, you're not the jerk here, because your dad is being super hypocritical. Because if he actually cared about you in the beginning, he would have taken more time to be there for you, instead of showing up later with a new family to try it all again. Am I the jerk for not allowing my sister to move in with me for something that she did 12 years ago involving the passing of my cat? Here's what happened. Okay, so my sister and I have never really had a close relationship. We don't dislike each other, but we have very different personalities and have never really clicked as siblings. When I was 14 years old, I started begging my parents for a kitten. Finally, on my 16th birthday, they gave me a beautiful gray cat. I quickly became very attached, and I took full responsibility for his care. One day while I was at school, my sister decided to bake chocolate cookies and thought that it was a good idea to give one to my cat. I didn't find out until hours later when I came home and saw the terrible state that he was in. I immediately called my dad, and we rushed him to the vet, but it was too late. He passed away in my arms on the way home, and I was devastated, crying so much that I even threw up. When we got back home, I went straight to my room, and my dad went to talk to my sister. My dad is usually a calm person, but I could hear him yelling from my room, but I was too heartbroken to make out the words. At some point while I was lying on my bed crying, my sister stormed into my room, saying it was my fault our parents were mad at her. I don't usually like confrontations, but in that moment, I snapped at her. My parents eventually had to separate us physically, and after that, we went back to ignoring each other, with no change to our relationship at all. Years later, I was able to move out thanks to a friend's dad, who gave me a great deal on a 3-bedroom apartment. I work from home, earning decent money, and I started fostering cats. Then, recently, my mom called me. After some small talk, she brought up my sister, explaining that she was having a tough time and she might get kicked out. My mom then asked if she could stay with me until she got back on her feet, since they live 4 hours away from her job and I live much closer. Well, I told my mom no and explained that I still don't trust her around my cats after what happened. My mom said that she understood, but also said that I should not hold on to something from 12 years ago. She added that we should be there for each other when she and my dad are gone, but I said no. She then accepted my answer and then hung up. The next day, my sister called, which was unexpected since we rarely talk. I had barely said hello when she started questioning why I wouldn't let her stay temporarily. So I gave her the explanation I had given my mom, and she got upset, saying I had never done anything for her and that I was the worst brother. But once she said that, I just hung up. Since then, she's been sending daily messages, apologizing, and asking for me to reconsider. My mom thinks that I should give her a chance, saying it could be an opportunity to mend our relationship. My dad, on the other hand, supports my decision and says that he would not want her in his place either. The pressure is now wearing on me. I don't want to see her out on the street or cause her to lose her job in some kind of way, but I can't forget what she did to my cat. So am I the jerk for not wanting her in my home? What should I do? Honestly, I don't blame you for not wanting her in your house, because if that happened to me, I think I would also still hold a grudge 12 years later. And sure, she didn't do it intentionally, but honestly, one mistake like that is more than enough for me to not trust someone around my animals. So in my opinion, I don't think you're the jerk, because this is something that you absolutely need to be careful of. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.